Hello, everyone. I'm Pedro Guerrero, co-founder of the Alumni Society and proud member of Angeles Investors. I want to welcome all of you to the Columbia University edition of our Wealth Creation Series, developed in partnership between the Alumni Society and Angeles Investors. The goal of these conversations is to hear from successful investors who are members of both groups, to learn from their life experiences building businesses, their net worth, and building wealth for our community. Because both groups share a belief that investing in Latinos, not just metaphorically, but literally through the investment of capital, is the most effective way to align our investment goals with our passions and thereby build generational and communal wealth. Today's conversation features two distinguished Columbia University alumni as are most of the attendees joining our conversation today, which is in keeping with the belief at the Alumni Society that if we bring together successful leaders who share both the cultural affinity and the distinction of having graduated from a top academic institution, we can establish meaningful connections that serve as a catalyst for our advancement. We hope you find these conversations valuable and that you continue to be engaged with the Alumni Society and also to join Angeles. So here's our agenda for today. After an introduction to our guest speakers by David Olivencia, co-founder of Angeles, our panelists will engage in a conversation about their life journey and perspectives on wealth. We will deep dive into generational wealth and investment strategies, and then open it up for Q&A. After the discussion, David will come back on stage and close out the program. But before I hand it off to him, I want to remind all of you that the Alumni Society's flagship event, the Leadership Summit, will take place on Thursday, June 23rd in New York City. Angeles Investors will also have a presence at the summit, so make sure to block the date on your calendar and to register for the event. You're not going to want to miss it. With that, I'd like to introduce my friend David Olivencia, Managing Director at Accenture, member of the Alumni Society, and co-founder of Angeles Investors. David, take it away.
Thank you, Pedro. Thank you for all you do and your team from the Alumni Society, Hispanic Executive, highlighting great executives within our community, great mentors, role models, and kind of keeping us all connected through the Alumni Society. We're going to have some fun today. We've got two amazing speakers. This is our second in this series. The first one we had was with focused on Harvard, the Alumni Society, and our Harvard alumni. And we had two great speakers, in Adela Cepeda and Luis Ubiñas, great Angeles members, great leaders in our community and our country, and really sharing great perspectives on wealth. And then with this one, we also have phenomenal speakers with us today from Columbia University. And we'll get to hear a bit of their stories and perspectives on wealth. And they're also great friends and also members of Angeles Investors. So as Pedro said, I'm gonna do a very brief intro of our guests, and then I'm gonna have them kind of walk through a bit of their life journey, and at least from the beginning stages, so it sets a bit of a context and where they come from. And I think it'll give a good backdrop to what it means when we talk about wealth, which shouldn't be that dissimilar for most of us on this call. Our first guest is Ivana Estrada. She has an amazing background and life story. I'm not going to get into all of that, but from a career perspective, most of it, if not all of it, in the technology industry. Morgan Stanley, doing some computer programming, Bank of America, Morgan Stanley, moving up, and now is at Google, and she leads data products and customer engagement there, around customer engagement and customer experience. And you think about data, you think about Google, there's nobody in the world who has as much data as Google does, and Ivana has a definite strong leadership position there. Our second guest is Damien Rivera. And Damien started his career out at Accenture, focused in the resources area, moved up and was promoted up to managing director there, and is now taken on, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, the CEO role at Alpha. And that stands for the Association of Latino Professionals for America. And amazing organization. We were just talking earlier about how they're now into Canada, maybe potentially going into Latin America or further into Latin America. Just amazing growth, about 100,000 or so members, university and professionals. So that is both of the backgrounds of our speakers here today. And we'll start with Ivana. And Ivana, if you can take us kind of, where were you born? Give me the family background and take us all the way through that kind of the Bank of America role or Morgan Stanley role early on, if you can, Ivana.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you for having me here, David. And it's just such a great privilege, really, to be part of the analyst investors community and just be connected with people that really care about like just supporting each other. There's nothing like better than that. And well, just to share a little bit about me, originally from Bolivia and South America, I was actually Generation Zero when I came here to New York City. So there's already a big jump, right? Coming from where I come from. I would never in a million years imagine to be where I am right now. Being there, for those who know South America, like developing countries, I come more from like a humble family, and then we ended up, not my parent, none of my parents went to college, and that's very common in our trajectories, I think, across many of our Latino friends. But with that said, how did I grow up? The environment I grew up was with very limited resources, a lot of scarcity, a lot of domestic violence. So many times you would think, okay, you have the scarcity, you don't have the school, you don't have all of these resources, or you don't have the connections, so you don't have any of these things. But you can always go home and say, hey, home is safe. Well, a home wasn't safe for me, right? It was always that aspect of having like that survival instincts that then I've learned and I continue to drive me in a way, right? So being in that environment in a way, I'm very thankful and grateful, which is something that I've learned in my life. Because if it's not because of those experiences, we are not the people who we are right now. So sometimes we blame things or we didn't have that, but then we don't realize that because of those things, we become who we really become out that potential that we can have. So that drove me really to be perseverant. I knew there was something there that I didn't want to be part of the domestic violence environment. I knew that I didn't have a chance to go to college in Bolivia. Actually, I started working since I was 14 years old. And I was working full time just to try to kind of like pay off through high school. And that was it. And I saw 4 years ahead of me. And I said, okay, I had my job. I was making $300 a month, I believe, at the time. And I could see 4 years from there, it was going to be the same. And something just didn't sit well with me. I'm saying, it's not right. I like variety, I like growth. And with that, I decided to give it a shot and come here to the U.S. Studied English, started learning English first. I went to a community college, LaGuardia Community College, because that was really the most affordable aspect in terms of affording for that. I remember people at the time would say, why would you go to community college? Well, that's what I can afford. I can pay and I can afford for that. And with that, I met really amazing people. And that's just why it's so important to be surrounded by people who are driven by common outcomes of growing, but also of giving back. Because I'll tell you, if we just grow and think about in a very selfish way, we don't get far. It's so important to, like what High Tech, is just another organization that David, you and I are part of. Is the push up and pull up, right? And that mentality, I think it's so important. How can we move forward? How can we advance? But also, how can we bring people along the way with us? So that really was the beginning, right? Because through LaGuardia Community College, I was surrounded with amazing people, professors, and ended up going to the Honor Society. And that led me into a scholarship that landed me at Columbia University. And I didn't know of an Ivy League school. I didn't know of any of those aspects. But it's really a blessing from God. And in a way, I'm thankful that I didn't know, because probably I would have felt intimidated. I just know that people that I met there were extremely smart, and I didn't understand why they still study so hard. So it was just really an amazing environment to be with, and I've learned really to become a student of life. That landed me into a job at Morgan Stanley as a software engineer. And from there, just kind of like started my trajectory, right? I did software engineering, and I mean, I was learning English really still like as a second language. So I wanted to have a role that allowed me to interact more with people. And that's when I went into product management in sales and trading, because I wanted to learn the markets, and I wanted to also just practice more my English, right? And that led me into that role, product management, sales and trading, building sales applications, risk and P&L systems. And it was just an amazing experience. And from there, you just like think about where is it that you can go contribute and at the same time continue to grow. And now I am in customer engagement role at Google for data of Google, which to your point is it's a lot of it, but I'm super enjoying it. So I'll just sum it up by saying that if I can summarize my trajectory was literally being curious in life and also being grateful. And that's what advanced me through the different stages in my life, the good days and the bad days.
No, excellent. It's a beautiful story, and it's just beginning. There's so much great things happening there. The $300 a month, I think you mentioned, not to now at Google, white community college, because hey, that's what I could afford. And then the Ivy League, and then on to to Morgan Stanley. Just an amazing trajectory thus far. Damien, I've also had the opportunity to understand a bit of your life story and background. Would love to share that with those who are listening, Damien.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, thank you for having me on. And Pedro, thank you for having me on as well. When I think about the trajectory, think about my life, it all comes down to how my parents set us up, myself, my brother, to be able to achieve. Right? It started out Co-op City in the Bronx. So those that don't know the Bronx, take a look up of Co-op City. You will understand where we started out. At around kindergarten, going into first grade, my dad worked in the post office. We moved to El Paso, Texas. And in moving to Texas, one of the best things and also one of the craziest things that happened to us as a family was my parents were able to buy their first house. Right. And here's why this is interesting. So we go from the Bronx to now we're in El Paso, Texas. We are living in a house. Then all of a sudden, there was an issue where there were some, what I'll call some prejudice things happening at my dad's job. And we ended up getting sent back to New York at a time where my parents could not sell the house because they were building new houses. And so the mortgage was too high versus what the house was worth. And so we end up going back. And I found this out years later, essentially went bankrupt. We are now back in Harlem. So back in the projects, projects, food stamps, holes in shoes, didn't own a pair of jeans until I was 13 years old. But what we had in scarcity of resources, we did not have in scarcity of mindset. Right. And so as I got back to Harlem, what my parents gave us was the right mindset to be able to achieve. And this is Harlem in the 80s, where everything you saw on TV about our community is that we couldn't succeed, right? Everybody apparently was on drugs. All the conversation was about how we could not succeed. But my parents, my family, and the community that I engaged with said otherwise. And so soon enough, they signed me up for a computer day camp. So I was in a computer day camp in Harlem. Nobody was working on computers at that time in the 80s. And so I learned to code when I was about 10 years old. Went to Rutgers University, chemical engineering. That's what I studied. And the reason I studied it is because my dad pointed out a guy at a funeral, my grandfather's funeral. He said, "You know who that guy is?" And I was like, "Dad, I have no idea who he is." He was like, "You know what he does?" And in my head, I'm thinking, "Dad, if I don't know who he is, I sure as heck don't know what he does." But I didn't say that to my dad, obviously, right? You got to give him respect. He said, "He is an engineer. That is what you want to be. He has to sign off before the buildings can open up in New York City. That's what you want to be." Apparently, Dad, I want to be an engineer. And so I went to Rutgers to study engineering. When I graduated, a lot of kids were getting all kinds of cool stuff, right? They were getting the cars, they were getting all kinds of stuff. We still did not have money like that. What I got from my parents was a hand-colored picture. And that hand-colored picture, a lot of y'all have seen it before. It's the one where there's a crane holding a frog in its mouth, and there's a frog holding the crane's neck. And it says, "Never, ever give up." And what my parents knew in that moment was I was about to go into a corporate world that they didn't know, but they prepared me for, because all the values that they gave me, my brother, our family, what we had seen would position us to be able to achieve success if we never gave up. And as we went into the corporate world, my dad talked about making sure we had a plan. A goal without a plan is a wish, and making sure we had the plans for how we were going to move forward. I remember racking up credit card debt in college, and my dad talking to me about how that would follow me if I did not straighten up with respect to that, because they were giving kids credit cards when we didn't have a dime of income that could be written down on a piece of paper. But here's your credit card with a bunch of money on it. a bunch of money on it, right? $500, $1,000. And so what I realized when I started going into the professional world is, although we did not come from a family of wealth, we came from a family of a wealth of information that built the foundation for us to be able to achieve more, because our mindset was set to be able to identify what the opportunities were going to be. And so I went to a company called Accenture, which you know very well, David. Phenomenal place. I say I'm a better person for having worked there. I'm a better father, son, husband, brother, friend, having worked at that company. Mm-hmm. And years into it, before I'm up for partner, a guy by the name of David Morales says to me, "Are you ready for that jump?" And I say, "Absolutely, I'm ready." He said, No. Are you sure you're ready? I said, "If you're asking me twice, it means there's something I have no idea that I don't even know." He was like, "Look, there is a way for you to make this very lucrative for yourself. And there's also a way for you to not do that. And if you're willing to share with me where you are financially, I'm willing to help you understand how to maximize the wealth that you can get being here." And he started taking me on this journey. And so instead of, when I got that MD promotion, instead of going and buying that MD house, and instead of going out and buying that MD car, we were patient. We had our plan in place. My wife and I knew exactly what we were going to do, when we were going to do it, to make sure we were able to start building our wealth. We essentially started building our wealth machine with stock investments, putting money into different investment opportunities, living in the same co-op, same little co-op with 2 kids, right? And then soon enough, we started to realize the potential that was out there. And I'll say, the few years later, there was a explosion at the church that I went to growing up, the place where my parents got married, and in Harlem. And it started calling me, where I started realizing, as much as I had been doing in my community, I hadn't been doing enough. And I started to remember one of the things that my dad had said about, even though we were on certain services from the government, that was angel investment money in us as a family. And if you take a look back at all the taxes we have paid since being off of that, not just us, but also all of my father's brothers and sisters, and all the siblings and all the kids after that, what we realized is that was an angel investment, a VC investment in us as a family, and positioned us to be able to do well, to then be able to figure out how we can give back. And in that moment, starting to think about, how do I more deliberately give back? And I shifted careers into this company called Alpha, a nonprofit, and it has been an amazing experience since then. So I will stop there, but to say, as I look back on my journey, what I realized is my parents, even though we didn't have the financial wealth, it was the foundational principles of life that they gave that allowed me to be able to have the understanding of how to move forward, to build wealth for myself, my family, and those in my community that I could share information with on how they can start their journey as well.
Damien and Ivana, just amazing backgrounds and stories and the foundation that you have in terms of growing up, what you've learned, the lessons along the way, and where you're at today. And and Damien, I would say too, the angel investment that America made in you, right, has given us a hell of a return in what you've been able to do, and what you're doing, and what you will do in your family as well. And then, so Damien, we were talking. You touched a little bit on it about wealth, but then let's go into wealth, because you both obviously didn't come from wealth. But we'll start maybe with Ivana. And if you look at your perspective, I mean, you worked at some of the biggest banks in the world, right? You're now at one of the largest companies in the world. And you've been able to do a lot better than the $300 a month you were making, right? What are some things you've learned just about wealth in general, building it, maintaining it, what's a little bit of your thoughts and strategy on that?
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. So I heard this, and we have these conversations in terms of like wealth and money. And first of all, I think, the definition of wealth is different to different people. And I wanted to explain that a little bit because many times we go into wealth thinking it's about financial assets alone. And along the way in my life, I learned that financial abundance is just part of wealth, at least from my perspective, right? Because you can have all the money in the world, you can have all the abundance in the world in terms of like assets here and there. But if you're unhealthy, or if you have a bad relationship with your spouse, or you don't have the support at home, or your kids or your parents, or something is off, or your friends, or you have a toxic environment at work, or like maybe you have something like going on, like you don't have time, you're working like literally every hour of the day, and you don't have time for yourself, for your family, then no matter how much money you have, then I think we have to reassess the definition of wealth. So I think wealth for me is like a combination of multiple assets. Financial abundance is just one of them. Health is another one. Time is another one. Relationships is another one. Your emotional state is also important. Your relationship with God, or what it keeps you centered. Because everything in this world is going to change. It's going to move. People are going to fail you. You might lose jobs. You might lose family members. You might have fights. Everything is going to, at some point, disappoint you. So for me, just holding on into that rock for me has been my faith, and allows me to center myself that money and wealth or financial abundance is one pie. It's a piece of it. So with that, it gives you so much gratefulness and gives you so much curiosity. And if you ask me, it makes you in a way fearless, and it makes you in a way you don't have like it breaks any limits, because you're grateful and you start from that place, and you know that everything is happening in a way to a reason. You have to work hard, but now there is less fear. You kind of like break that, and now you say, okay, let me go, like what Damien was sharing, right? He went from Accenture to a place that now probably he's more aligned with his mission, right? He's thinking, I'm doing here. He didn't go there like necessarily, let me see the dollars, right? He's looking about what can I do here to make a difference. So that's one of the main reasons I joined Google. Google is a fascinating area, but if you ask me, it's just like, it's just so amazing company, because they really put the user first. And I'm like really thinking, for me, those values are very important. So that's the definition of wealth from a starting perspective. Now, if we go into like the financial aspect of it, definitely I would say start thinking. I like to simplify things, right? So I would put like when it didn't have anything, right? And whatever I have right now, I know I can lose it tomorrow. And I live like that, right? And then just kind of like thinking. Also, I'll tell you one more thing, which I think is important in our community when it comes to money. I've learned early on, like, money is kind of like evil, or maybe, I don't know, it was that fear. Like, I guess some people would say we need to give ourselves permission to do well. And that was, maybe doesn't apply to everyone, but that definitely applied to me, right? It was to a point where I started doing better, and all of a sudden, like your friends, your people around you will start questioning in a way, telling you, oh, so now you have a nice vacation. Oh, now you have the money, or you're doing X, Y, and Z. And then I started feeling guilty for splurging a little bit here and there, until I realized, why am I doing that? That's ridiculous. So that is so important, because if anyone here is feeling like that, I'm telling you, you have to do a check, because it's like a thermometer, right? And we are putting limits on ourselves if we think that this is as far as should be going, or as low as I would go in. So my point there is that it's just so important to give ourselves the permission to do well and to help other people. And if others say, hey, you should be doing X, Y, and Z, then they can do whatever they want with the resources God gave them, right? But you should also feel okay with your success. Money doesn't make you a better person. Money doesn't make you a worse person. If you ask me, money really amplifies who you are. If you have like $100 today, and you give $10 to somebody to help, whether it is for food, or you buy somebody an ice cream, or whatever it is, then that you're contributing, you're giving something of your $100. If you are not giving those $10 for $100, if you have 1,000 or 1,000,000 or $2 million, nothing is going to tell you that because you're going to give that $100,000 or $10,000. Does that make sense? So it really amplifies who you are. It can make you a better person, a worse person. No, it's just going to amplify who you truly are. So should you wait to have money to contribute and do something good for others? No way. I don't think so, right? I personally think that sometimes we might not have the money, but you can have the skill sets to teach somebody else, to mentor somebody else. You have the time to volunteer. So there's always ways to give back. And when the money comes, and then there's more, right? It's actually one aspect. Now, how to get there? I would say, I'll tell you two things. One of them is like how I think about investment. So I simplified, put it into three pools, if you mind, in terms of like how I think about it. The first pool, or the first bucket, it's mainly what we would call like peace of mind, right? Peace of mind or security. The second bucket is more like the growth risk bucket. And the third one is the dream bucket. So those are the three areas that are how I think in terms of like financial abundance, right? When I say peace of mind, it's okay. Do you have maybe, like enough money that if you don't have a job, or can you survive on that? Maybe you have a home that is paid off. That could also be security, right? So are those things that are to an extent illiquid that you can, and also could be liquid like in cash, but you have that safety for yourself. The second bucket talks about risk and growth, or growth and risk. I like to put the risk before growth, because many times we go after those growth assets and then we forget the risky aspect of it, right? So that is when we're talking about investing in like the markets, investing in private equity, and all these different aspects that give you higher returns, but in a way it's also it could also come with more risks, right? And the last one is the dream bucket that I like. I really like it because it's more about like, what do you want to make of your life, right? It could be physical things that maybe we're looking for, have more comfort in our lives, in our families, but it could also be creating experiences for others, right? It could be creating an experience for your family. I don't know, maybe buying an apartment for your mom, or maybe it is taking all your family or your friends on vacation, sponsoring a kid for scholarships, feeding, I don't know, 10,000 people a year in some place in South America or in the US. So all of those experiences, if you ask me, if we don't make them part of it, it doesn't happen. So those are the three buckets that I think in terms of assets. So when I invest, when I do the allocation, I think on that aspect. And then also the ways that, like in terms of how to go about it. I mean, saving is so important, because if we don't save, we can't invest, right? So saving is important. The second one is like earning more, right? So how do you earn more?
Yep.
Is by adding more value. And finally, also think about your lifestyle, right? It doesn't mean live less, but in New York, it's different that, let's say, living in Florida. So you have to think about like, you can still have the same experiences, but you need to know where to go, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And it's, I like the way just the base and the context you said about really what is wealth, and how you look at wealth to begin with more holistically, right? Relationships, health, and you went on and you just say, hey, the financial part is just a bit of it. And then how you kind of look at that, and hey, I could lose it all one day. So I'm also kind of very humble in how you approach it. And then your three buckets, right? The peace of mind, the risk, and the growth, and then the dream. I think it's important to dream. I think we don't dream big enough. So I think having those dreams and going after, I think, is just a great framework and a model that you have there. Damien, you touched a little bit on it. I know, with chatting with dear friend David Morales there, and so, and now you come across a lot of different professionals, even students who are also kind of learning and meeting the interesting people as well in the wealth space that we were touching on earlier. What maybe let's just double click a little bit more on your take on it, and kind of what you learned and what you'd like to share with these great alumni here from Columbia.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. So a couple things, right? I think wealth is a mindset and a habit. It is not a strategy and a tactic, right? The strategy and the tactics will come out of how your mindset is and the habits you form. And so if you start developing habits where you are thinking of opportunities, you are thinking of growth, you're going to start seeing them more and more often, right? Consider it like this for a second. If you're thinking about buying a car, all of a sudden you see that same car everywhere. Like you're like, oh my gosh, this car's everywhere. No, the same number of cars have always been there, and you've just never been looking for it, right? And so wealth is a very similar type of thing. And so going back to one of my dad's sayings for us, if you're going to be there, right? That's the whole mindset piece. if you want to build wealth for your family, and I love how Ivana talked about it, wealth is not just a financial piece, it is a mental piece, it is a physical piece, it is all of it together. Think about what wealth means for you and make sure that you are putting yourself into the circles that are having those conversations so that you can start building your machines and systems. Just like at work, you build processes to make things more efficient. You go ahead and build new, customer information systems or, whatever analytics processes that are out there that you're doing. Well, why not apply those same skills to your own life from a financial wealth building perspective, right? Starting off with some of the foundational pieces being literally make sure you have a budget so that you're not throwing money at something that means necessarily nothing, but an emotional response will go ahead and make you buy it. Have your budget in place, build up your savings. And what starts to happen is when you have your machine in place, now you start looking bigger. Side note, the amount of effort it's going to take you to get to a goal of $1 million, it's not going to be that much more effort to get to a goal of $10 million. And so if you have those visions and those dreams, Yvonne, I'm going to steal all your words because you were so good with what you were saying, right? You have those visions and those dreams. What's going to happen is you have your systems in place. You have your mind thinking about the potential opportunities. You are putting yourself in positions of conversations with people that are like in this room over here, the last one with the Harvard folks, other Angeles investors, alumni society members. You are in the mix. You are going to hear things and learn things that you can now start tweaking your system to grow additional ways. Grow in wealth. Maybe you've never even considered entrepreneurship through acquisition, right? You want to be an entrepreneur, but you like what you're doing, but you have some extra money. Maybe you're going to go ahead and get a group of folks together that's going to go ahead and buy a company. And now you're able to leverage your skill set to go ahead and help with the supply chain there, while your buddy's able to help with the analytics piece. And all of a sudden, the company that was maybe worth $1 million is now going to be worth $10 million because of the small changes that you were able to do. See, thinking about how you build and those dreams is what's going to put you in position to identify the opportunities. As long as your mindset is that of abundance and your risk profile is such that you are willing to take those risks. And side note, you will be more willing to take those risks when you have those foundational pieces in place, right? My dad, I remember a conversation when I was offered a project that essentially it was either I was going to make managing director off of it or I was going to get fired on it. And my dad, I was like, I'm trying to figure out. He's like, well, what's the worst that can happen? I was like, I don't know. I get fired. He's like, okay, so what's the worst that happens there? Like literally worst, no money. We lose the house, lose our apartment. He's like, okay, so that's the worst. So what's that? I guess I'm homeless, Dad. Like that's the worst. I guess that could happen. He was like, we've got a little bit of land in North Carolina. We will chop down some trees and put up some tents, and then we will build it all back up again. We've lived in worse, right? In that moment, right, he took the investment he made years ago in a little piece of land. I said, look, it's about 15 acres or so in North Carolina, and turned that into me being willing to take a risk on the project that ultimately got me to that next level, right? And he allowed where his history came from when they had nothing in Puerto Rico. They had like nothing. And although we hadn't lived homeless in worse, he allowed his story to give me strength to say he knew that we could build it all up again. And he used the we so that I knew I wasn't just me.
Right, you're not alone.
It was us as a family. And education is liberation, right? Our education meant that they could take all our stuff away from us and we will build up again, even stronger. So my wealth to me is mindset. Wealth to me is habit. Wealth to me is building that foundation, being willing to take risk and thinking big. Those dreams that Ivana talked about, dream big. And whatever you're dreaming, dream 10 times bigger than that. And get yourself in those circles. If you're going to be there in this world, be in those conversations. Go ahead and take the time to watch these Zooms. Be in those rooms. because that's where you're going to learn some new things. They're going to translate to opportunity that you never even knew was possible. And you may be the missing link to the next unicorn opportunity, right? Believe in that mindset, have it.
No, amen. A lot of great nuggets in there. I think your nugget around thinking big, right, and really thinking 10 times big, almost big enough where it should scare you, is a great one. I love the foundational principle. I love education is liberation, right? And as long as in this whole journey, right, we need to always not only we come in with educations, those who are from Columbia, analysts, investors, but we continue to learn, right? And the more we learn, the more we're liberating ourselves, and just that mindset. We got a couple minutes here before we go into Q&A. I'd say maybe 1 minute or two, Ivana, on angel invest. So we'll talk about wealth, the holistic, the finance part, the peace of mind, the risk and growth, and the dream. Talk about angel investing, maybe 1 or 2 minutes, and how that fits into it in your investment, and then a little bit on analyst investors, and then we'll have Damien do the same, and then we'll go into Q&A.
So if you ask me when it comes to, first of all, just one quick comment on dreams. Definitely double down on dreams. The one thing I would say is that make sure that they are like followed with a plan. And because that is so important, dreams are just going to stay dreams, right? So we need to set up goals, we need to set up plans, and then go after that. Because many people, they just it's not that they plan to fail, they just fail to plan, right? So it's so important to pursue that aspect. So that is definitely important. When it comes to startups, David, I think, it falls under that second bucket that I mentioned, which is like the risk growth bucket. So it's important that it's not really the core of our investments, but it's an area that, if you ask me, has been restricted to an extent to big institutions, and many times, like to the sophisticated investors who have like billions of dollars and so forth. So I think, what we have here with Angeles investors is having the opportunity to, in a way, provide this to other professionals who also don't need to invest millions of dollars on the startups, but they're able to put like a smaller chunks of money and still be able to do two things: have that social impact as supporting to these startups, but also that opportunity for wealth creation, right? So that's how I see it. Things to consider when I look at startups is always looking at their financial statements. Cash flow is one of the most important ones. So there's the three ones, right? There's the P&L, there's the balance sheet, and there's the cash flow. I always prioritize cash flow because in revenue by the paper, the companies can say amazing things. I mean, I think all of us here have heard about Lehman Brothers, and they had like an amazing revenue and ROI, and like their P&L and their balance sheet was pretty good, but nobody was paying attention to their cash flow. So I think that is super important. Things that I look at is like the team, the expertise. Sometimes we get carried away by the product, but not necessarily. Like, let's say we're building a specific application for the health industry for hospitals. Okay, great. Then you look at the team and you have all these experts on all the application and technology, but you don't have expertise when it comes to the health industry. So I think that is so important to see as well. Keep an eye on the competition, like what are the competitions for these startups? What impact does technology have, right? In terms of like now versus in the future. Look at the economy as well of where we are, like we're in COVID. What's been super successful now is great. Is it always going to be after COVID is gone? It's something that we need to ask ourselves. Also, the impact of regulations, government, how is that going to impact? Because sometimes you can create your business and then there's a regulation that comes in, and guess what? You cannot collect this data, and now you are reliant on that. So the aspects of diversity as well is something that I think about. And as I mentioned, and this is something that it's so important, putting the user first, right? Thinking as what is the problem that we're solving and how are we adding value? Because if we add value, then we have a piece of the market share. I mean, nowadays we all know we're going through this inflation, and it's going to continue to grow. So the idea here is how can we beat inflation? Is really thinking through how can we add value? Because if we're adding value to users, we always have a piece of the market, and that's something to keep in mind.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Damien, on your side, angel investing, your perspectives on it in the context of wealth, mindset, thinking big, your approach.
So for me, one, if you are considering angel investing, right? Start educating yourself, start stepping into traffic. One of the best things that happened for me with respect to this was, it was because of Columbia getting me into circles to be able to start understanding the opportunities. I think angel investing is a great way to build wealth, but you also need to understand that the risk profile is significantly high in terms of the potential return being very low to nothing for quite a few of those investments you make. However, that's where, and one of the reasons why I love Angeles investors, being part of a network where I'm able to benefit from the knowledge of others that are in the room, as well as contribute my own, makes it the risk profile go down significantly, because it's not just me evaluating for myself. I now have, potentially, 10 people, and a lot of others that are taking a look at these companies, so that there's a lot of different perspectives coming in. So I think angel investing is key. I also think angel investing in the Latino community is key. We get a very small percent of angel and VC investments, period. And so for us to be able to support the Latino community, not because someone's Latino, but because they have a great company and they just happen to be Latino, is important. And so to me, I think it's something that you should really consider. If you're thinking about it, just get into the room where people are at. I'll give this one example. This may sound like a weird example, but follow me along for a second. At Rutgers, I would go and play basketball at court 3. Court 3 is where it was the last court. That's where the people who weren't very good played. Met a lot of people there. It was cool. And I remember this one time, this guy that I knew that was playing in court 1 said, "You got to play in court 1. That's how you're going to get better." And so I started to play in that court, right? And I started to I was never as good as the folks that were able to be crazy, but 2 things happened to me. 1, I got better just by being in the proximity of those that knew what they were doing. 2, my circle of influence grew, because now I knew the people that were in court 3. I knew the court 1 folks, which were in a lot of different areas of study around the school. All of a sudden, my network grew. So my point of saying all that is this: when you step into areas that you are not used to, angel investing, getting to know the VC world, who are the players, who are the people to have conversations with, you start growing your network in such a way that those dreams that you've been envisioning and those plans that you've put in place, you can now start seeing opportunities to execute on those things in a very real way.
No, that's great. I think it's diversifying your knowledge. I'm going to move over here because Tank's son is in my it's diversifying your knowledge and being open to learning, right? So I think that's a key component there. And when you look, so you look at your portfolio, you look at angel investing as a part of your portfolio. Any thoughts on what it is? What should it be?
For me, 10% is where my wife and I have decided we are capping ourselves at. And I will say I've gotten lucky. So in terms of how we've looked to invest, it's all been things that have had a social good in them in some way. But capping at 10%, the team, I got lucky. My first angel investment is doing very well right now. But I say I got lucky because it was somebody that I met at Columbia. They pitched something. I was like, this is phenomenal, fantastic, I'm in. I got lucky. As I look back, I'm like, oh my gosh, all the due diligence that I didn't do. What if this would have been horrible? But we've capped ourselves at 10%. And now where we are asking ourselves is, we have an investment opportunity in a club, which is not a social good type of thing. Do we allow ourselves to expand in an area that's not according to how we've invested in the past? And so the fun part about that is you're just seeing all these new ideas, and you're learning so much that you can apply not just to yourself, but also teaching your kids. I have 2 kids, 21 and 18, and they both know the companies that we invest in. They understand the whys. So they're getting involved in it that way as well.
Yeah, I think it's a great one. It's a great learning experience. And some of the, at least some of them are kind of tech. They're doing some interesting things that I think kids can also kind of learn from and kind of watch them grow. And who knows, maybe work for them someday too. Ivana, how about when you look at the angel side of your portfolio, kind of where you're at today, roughly, if you want to, and then what you're thinking about in the future?
Yeah, so I'm on board that wherever I invest, it has to be something that I believe on, right? And this is a lesson learned in the sense that many times we are big consumers, but sometimes we don't necessarily are investors in our community, and that needs to change. So if you ask me, I'm looking at when I'm looking at investments for startups, I'm looking, to your point, social impact is definitely close to my heart, so it's super important. But I'm also looking at things of products that I value, right? So if I'm interested in an area that is related to that I believe, for example, like in media, and it's something that I know that media is so important to society and the message that we give and representation and how are we so if I have that vision that a specific area or industry is going to have an impact in our society, definitely I support that. And that goes along with anything, right? If we are looking into products, like many times, like in the public, we might buy Apple products or we might buy XYZ products, but we don't necessarily own the stock. So similarly, when it comes to the startup world, it's like, where is it that we're spending? What are the areas that we believe on so that we can invest in those? I don't have a percentage that I have defined. Right now, I'm just exploring right now. But as I mentioned, it's in that the way that I put my percentages is more in those three buckets that I mentioned before. So is it okay, what percentage for me feels safe, like let's say in that peace of mind? And that changes, that changes based on your lifestyle. That changes based on how old you are and the responsibilities you have with family and kids, or whatever else you need to do. And then you go into your risk bucket and your dream bucket. So to me, that is the percentage. And then the secret really for each of those three areas is that once you define those three those three allocations, is the diversification, right? How can we diversify in each of these spaces? Because unless you're going to be there like day in and day out, and even the people who are day in and day out, I think you can't really time the market. So diversification really is the best way of going about it.
Thank you for that, Ivana. There's one question here around imposter syndrome. So it's you hear about imposter syndrome from a professional perspective. Have you experienced imposter syndrome while building wealth and being potentially in these new circles? Damien, let's start with you on this one.
Yeah, so I love that question, right? So one, do you expect? Yes. Like, did I experience it? Yes. And to me, the way I was able to get through it was, one, leveraging the network at Columbia that I had built. So I started to go to angel investing, VC types of meetings and kind of get-togethers and things like that. And what I did was, first I started with the Latino focused ones because I felt more comfortable there. So first I did that to get myself educated on certain things. I just felt more comfortable asking questions. The second thing that I did was, when I went to more general ones, I would bring a buddy, right? So someone that was very familiar with that world. A lot of times it would come from my Columbia cohort, my MBA cohort, and sort of go with someone that knew the space and was able to help me understand some of the things that were going on that I didn't necessarily understand. So I had that safety with that person and going there. And then what I realized and started seeing was, going to enough of these things, you start seeing a lot of the same people. And so you start getting comfortable from that aspect too. And so, if I had to kind of label that, one, go to a place where you're going to feel a little bit less of the imposter syndrome. For me, it was the Latino community that was investing. Number two, when you go to the more general ones, bring a buddy. It could be someone who's Latino or someone who's not Latino, but a buddy that you're going to feel comfortable walking into that room with. And then over time, you will have built up your confidence to walk into any room and just know you add value in there no matter what. Side note, you would have added value day one too, right? But this is how you can slowly get comfortable with it if you're not comfortable the first time.
Thank you, Damien. Ivana.
I want to say, start by knowing who you are, right? We're human beings, and sometimes it's it's, as I mentioned, when I was at Columbia, I was lucky that I didn't know what it meant, because potentially I would have been intimidated or would have that imposter syndrome, right? Because in my mind, it's about that. But I would say start by really asking yourself who you are, and understand and valuing yourself and what you bring to the table. And maybe you will always find a gap, and that's great, because then that's the part of where we need to be curious and grow. But there's so many things that you already can point on day one, add value. So recognizing who you are, recognizing your capabilities, and not underselling yourself, I think is so important. Because let me tell you something. If you don't value yourself, you can expect others to value you. And that is so important, right? Sometimes we live in this society that we want people to approve of us, and many times we tend to kind of like maybe put people on a pedestal. But recognize it: we are all human beings, regardless how much money you have or how little money you have, or class status you have, or you're a man, a woman, different type of races. We all have human. You're all human, right? So we'll have like human needs, in the sense of like we all want to be happy. We want the best for our family, and we have those common aspirations. So I would say ground yourself on those commonalities. And people, maybe you like sports, maybe somebody else likes cars, maybe somebody else likes to travel the world, maybe somebody else likes to help the pets, or like, and maybe you're curious about technology, or you want to give something back in technology, or like a different. So there's different commonalities that you need to find with people. But I would say start by knowing yourself, valuing yourself. If you don't value yourself, nobody else will. And then as you're going into those circles, I would say more than thinking of people around, it's more about thinking what is the common outcome and the common vision that you have with them. Because when that happens, to your point, it's about how do we make that happen together, and not about like, oh, who's who has a title, who has more money. It doesn't matter. I mean, I guess potentially it goes up and down, but it goes back to what I was saying at the beginning. It makes me fearless when I know that I recognize, like, I'm grateful. I'm a human being. Everybody's a human being. I'm God's child. And you know what? I can just go have a conversation. What's the worst thing that's going to happen when you go into a new circle? Like being at Columbia, or being in a great company or so forth. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? You might go into there. It works. You have some commonalities. You work towards something common. There might be some people who might be, hey, you know what? I don't want to deal with you. That's fine. I mean, you can't be afraid of rejection. I applied to the best university in Bolivia for college. I wanted to apply for a scholarship, the best university, right? And that was right after high school. I couldn't afford to go to college, but I applied for it hoping that I was going to get into scholarship. Recognize, think of it as an Ivy League of Bolivia. And I didn't get it, right? Because I tried to get it through athleticism, right? Then I tried to get it by being top 3. None of those worked. And I got rejected. And you say, is that a failure? No, because guess what? From rejection comes direction. And when that was, and that happens in relationships too. You might be in a relationship, and this guy or this girl, maybe, you should just move and say next. Just move and say next.
Mm-hmm.
So the next for me was LaGuardia and then Columbia. So if I had been given that opportunity over there in Bolivia, I would have the best Ivy League school of Bolivia, but I don't think I would have missed out on people. So just don't be afraid. People say no, rejection is not failure. Rejection is direction to better things. What's next is always better.
That's the social. Those who are hitting social media, rejection is direction. Get it out there. Get it out there. No, such a great points there, Ivana. Then one last question. This one's directed to Damien, and it's up there on the screen. What are some of the steps you would take to get in those room spaces, knowing what you know now, 15 years?
Yeah. So to me, big thing is leveraging existing organizations that are built to that you align with from your personal mission that will open doors, right? And that's for Angeles Investors, the Alumni Society, Alpha, of course. I'm going to throw Alpha in there as a CEO, like apps, organizations that are focused on opening those doors. And so I wish I had known more about, well, Analyst Investors didn't exist 15 years ago, but this is where you plug in and have those conversations. I will tell you, I am one of the shyest people you will ever meet. It may not seem like it through this conversation. I asked my wife out by throwing a letter at her as I ran by, and I didn't even talk to her as I ran by. I just threw a letter at her, right? Like, that's me naturally. going back to my dad's thing of if you're going to be there, that means you may feel awkward. You may feel a certain way, but if you are going to be in the room, make your presence known. If you're going to be in this world, make your presence known. And so engage in the groups that are built to create access, right? It is up to you to take the step into that room. It is up to you to take advantage of the access that is being created for you. And everybody is hoping that you, and the you, I am talking to everybody that's listening to this today, everybody that's watching this in the future, the doors are being opened and the access is there for you to step through. And we hope you stand on the shoulders that came before you. And then you are knocking the heck out of the next thing and then grabbing the next person behind you and throwing them up on your shoulders, right? Continue to do that. That's what I would have done 15 years ago, even more so. Get involved with Alumni Society, get involved with Anglos Investors, get involved with Alpha, get involved with groups that speak to your mission and help you get access.
Wow, that was excellent. Damien, Ivana, thank you so much for sharing kind of and really opening up, sharing your life stories, your perspectives on investing, some tips, some techniques. I call it some leadership examples, leadership quotes. Really appreciate it. I want to thank Analyst Investors, thank the Alumni Society, and Columbia University, right? Those who are attending from Columbia University. As it relates to Analyst Investors, look, from a membership perspective, lots of value to being a member, world-class network. We're investing in some of the leading companies within our community. You're going to improve your innovation and entrepreneurial mindset and leadership mindset in all these business models in this tech world. And fourth is these startup companies providing opportunities for our members. Some of our members have become CFO at these companies. Other of our members have went on to take board seats at some of these startup companies. So lots of value in being a member. We'd love to have you become a member. And I would just say from the Alumni Society, as Pedro mentioned, big event, June 23rd out there in New York. That the Alumni Society is putting on. Be there or be square, have some fun, network in person, hang out. It's going to be a lot of fun. I want to thank everyone again. I know Dalia had put some other things on there in the comments around joining Analyst Investors if you're interested. Again, thanks all. Thanks our guest, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Latinos are actually very responsible for the addition of new jobs in the American economy. However, access to capital to this group is extremely limited. We want to help change that. We want to make a difference both with our capital and make the private equity community aware of all that we have to offer and all of the opportunity that they're passing up on.
Our mission is to find, fund, and grow the most promising Latinx and Hispanic ventures. We want to make sure that Angeles Investors is a platform in where these companies not only do well from the business perspective, but also they shine. So we are very involved in building the next generation of Latinx and Hispanics entrepreneurs.